Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. I'm finally back. Sorry for the wait. Who knew baby showers could go on so long? Anyway, if you can remember all the way back to Friday and a bit of Saturday, there's plenty of news. The protests in Portland continue to grow in response to Trump's occupation. Weekend nights saw upwards of 3,000 people, including new coalitions. In addition to the wall of moms, they now have a wall of dads, a wall of vets, teachers against tyrants, healthcare workers, and lawyers for BLM. The protesters are also improving their gear and coordination reminiscent of Hong Kong protests, with lines of umbrellas and makeshift shields and crews with leaf blowers quickly clearing out any gas or spray. In fact, they're so effective that all the gas seems to be occupying the courthouse itself, while the protesters enjoy clean air. The funniest part is that the DHS have actually started mimicking the protesters and bringing their own leaf blowers. Cracks me up. Who are the professionals again? But it's not all conflict. The protesters also have an air of festivity, complete with music, dancing, chanting, and their very own painter, who comes out every night to paint the scene. Meanwhile, pandemic-era voting in New York has turned into a debacle of epic proportions. A whopping 20% of absentee ballots are being thrown out due to technical reasons, from mistakes ranging from not signing in the right spot on the back of the envelope, to mistakenly putting the voting instructions in with the ballot, to ballots being received past the deadline, and plenty of New Yorkers never received their ballots at all or got them only on Election Day. The summer heat broke the glue on some sealed envelopes, or post offices didn't postmark them properly. The whole thing is a disaster, facilitated by a lack of preparation and coordination on the part of officials to handle mail-in voting in states which have been relying on in-person voting up till now. These officials failed to anticipate issues, failed to educate voters, and failed in logistics. Much like with UBI, if all states had been using mail-in voting as the primary means of voting prior to the pandemic, we would be in good shape. But they've been relying on antiquated methods that are vulnerable in this situation and are having to adapt on the fly and at the last moment due to resistance, incompetence, and complacency. If this plays out in other elections, particularly the presidential election, well, I don't have to tell you the stakes or what could happen. Elon Musk expressed his thoughts on the stimulus, and it triggered a tidal wave of willful ignorance, stupidity, cancel culture, and hypocrisy on Twitter. What Elon said was, quote, "Another government stimulus package is not in the best interests of the people, in my opinion," end quote. Sounds bad, right? And that was enough for thousands to immediately start expressing their judgment. Thing is, that wasn't the whole thread. He went on to say, quote, "As a reminder, I'm in favor of universal basic income. Goal of government should be to maximize the happiness of the people. Giving each person money allows them to decide what meets their needs, rather than the blunt tool of legislation which creates self-serving special interests. These are jammed to the gills with special interest earmarks. If we do a stimulus at all, it should just be direct payments to consumers," end quote. So he doesn't support sending aid through biased, inefficient, and ineffective bureaucracy, rightly so, since it doesn't reach everyone, gets siphoned off by administrators and special interests, and takes forever to arrive. Instead, he supports sending money directly to the people. You can argue over whether people should settle for whatever Congress is willing to give us, but Musk's position is certainly reasonable. Now, there were all sorts of stupidity in regards to this. People were railing at him without reading the rest of the thread. People were arguing UBI doesn't really help people, since in one of the comments he used the word consumers that set off a whole deluge of ignorant responses offended by the word. It's a mess. But the worst was to see Bernie Sanders join in. Bernie tweeted, quote, "What a hypocrite. Elon Musk has received billions in corporate welfare from U.S. taxpayers. Now he wants to stop 30 million Americans who lost jobs from receiving $600 a week in unemployment benefits, while his wealth has gone up by $47 billion over the past 4 months. Pathetic," end quote. Now, I don't like having to criticize Bernie because we really need his clan and the YangGang working together to pass progressive reforms. We need to be allies. But that leads me to the criticism. I think this tweet of his encapsulates the greatest weaknesses of Bernie. First, he clearly did not read the thread or chose to ignore the rest of it so that he could support his narrative of rich people evil. Despite the fact that Bernie himself has proposed temporary UBI as stimulus, he is now attacking someone who also supports that, specifically for them expressing a preference for it, which, by the way, Musk is right to prefer. Then, Bernie goes on to demonize Musk for getting subsidies from the government for developing electric vehicles, solar panels, and other cutting edge, largely green technology. Not only has the government always done this to advance tech that will benefit humanity, but which is not yet feasible to leave to the free market to develop, not only is it an incredibly positive thing for the government to do, not only has Musk succeeded in advancing these technologies where no one else has, but this is literally part of Bernie's own Green New Deal. Government funding for green technology is entirely what Tesla is about, and is entirely what Bernie's Green New Deal is about, and Bernie is actively attacking him for that as well. Again, Bernie attacks his own policy just to have something to say against Elon. Unless, that is, Bernie didn't mean the subsidies but meant actual bailouts, in which case he's just flat out wrong. Because the only bailouts that Tesla has ever received were in the 2008 financial crisis, along with every other auto company, and Tesla was actually the only auto company to fully repay their loan with interest, which means it was basically the opposite of corporate welfare in the end. And finally, he tries to paint Musk as evil for Tesla's stock going up, something which had absolutely nothing to do with the virus. It was purely a result of Tesla succeeding, which is a good thing for all of us, because Tesla, unlike every other auto company, has been constantly reinvesting their profits into growing the business, producing more cars, and lowering the cost of those cars so that more people can drive electric vehicles. There is literally no part of Bernie's tweet that is not hypocritical, especially the part where he calls Musk a hypocrite. So this is a perfect example of Bernie's problem. He is so taken in by his own rhetoric that all rich people are bad, so committed to that narrative, that he is willing to not only attack a rich person who has actually done more good in the world than Bernie has managed, he's even attacking his own policies and causes to do so. It's completely irrational, counterproductive, and toxic. He's making enemies of people he should count as allies, just as he did during the campaign. And he's driving rational people away from his mostly reasonable platform with his radical, hypocritical, and divisive language. This is why he lost, and he appears to have learned nothing from it. And that makes me sad, because he's poisoning the progressive movement, turning it into an illogical cult of hatred and division, and it's going to hurt all of our efforts for real progress. I'm not giving up on uniting the camps, because we can't afford to give up on it, but it sure would be nice if Bernie would help instead of hurt his own cause. But I have some criticism for Yang too today. Andrew wrote a lengthy article on gaming, working off of some studies and his own experience. He drafted an argument that video games are drawing people out of the labor market and all other aspects of life because they are more rewarding than real life. He argued that they are only getting more compelling as time goes on, and that we will eventually have a dwindling force of productive workers subsidizing a growing group of disengaged gamers. I wasn't very impressed with this article, and here's why. It seems a departure from his usual pragmatic and solutions-oriented approach. This article seems quite pessimistic, seems to alternate between blaming video games and shaming gamers, and offers no solutions to these problems. What is the point of this article? While I agree that the problem is that games are more compelling than real life, I think we need to focus on making real life more compelling. We know a lot of the reasons that real life is becoming increasingly less compelling, particularly economically. People have less agency and opportunity as they receive the same old rewards while the cost of living continues to climb, forcing more and more work just to tread water. Most of us are stuck in occupations we don't get much intrinsic gratification from. We feel like we're trading our lives away just so we can continue existing, while trying to scrape meaning from personal relationships and hobbies where we can. Gaming is one of those hobbies, and it's very good at delivering what the economy is not: purpose and satisfaction. I've been a gamer all my life, an ardent one at that. I absolutely love games, particularly games which make me think, make me figure things out, challenge my mind with interesting problems to be solved. When I worked at jobs that I didn't find satisfaction in, I spent the rest of my time gaming or watching TV or whatever would give me what I was missing, or just let me veg out until I had to throw away another 8 hours of my life tomorrow. When I found something to work on that I was extremely passionate about, Yang's campaign and now this podcast, guess what happened? I stopped playing games, I stopped watching TV, and I now spend more time working than I ever did before, despite getting no compensation whatsoever for the work. Why? Because I care about this work. It feels purposeful to me. It satisfies me. That is what we need to be aiming to find for everyone. To find that work for every person that they can be happy doing and doing well. In my mind, video games are simply a good benchmark for comparison. If your work isn't more compelling than playing games, that isn't good work for you. The problem is, most of us don't have the opportunity to find and engage in the type of work that we would love right now. For many reasons, but chief among them, wage slavery. We also know the cure for that. Unfortunately, I'm again a prime example. Because we don't have a UBI and the market doesn't support the work I'm doing, I will likely have to end this podcast soon as my savings run too low and I'm forced back into some job that does not fulfill me and I will not be able to give my full potential to. I will once again feel my life is being wasted and I will probably return to gaming to fill the void. That is the disease of wage slavery. That is what is lost in forcing people into employment to survive. It is not a sickness of video games, it is a sickness of society, and it's one we need to fix. Humanity Forward has finally given a shout out to one of Scott's favorite authors, Teresa Funiciello, author of Tyranny of Kindness. They released a clip of her speaking many years ago on the damage done by poverty and that guaranteed income is the way to stop it. One point that I think we need to popularize from Teresa is that poverty is the #1 cause of death in the US and in the world. It comes in many forms and labels: starvation, exposure, fires, crime, even shortened life expectancy as we discussed before, but it's ultimately poverty that causes it. Many think of poverty as an inconvenience or a lack of luxury. It is not. It is death. It is suffering. It is a loss of opportunity and purpose that drains one's soul as it drains their life. It is a disease, and it is one that we must cure with UBI. Zach had an interesting tweet today saying, quote, "People knocked our entire campaign for lack of experience, yet the elected officials with experience are sitting around doing nothing while our country burns and millions suffer. We need to wake up." End quote. I couldn't agree more. I hope everyone who voted on experience is having a good hard look at what all our experienced politicians have wrought us so far in this pandemic. The worst performance almost in the entire world as far as curtailing the virus, and close to the worst stimulus response in the world as well. Maybe experience accepting bribes from lobbyists and being completely partisan is not what we need. Maybe we need something new. On a lighter note, if you've always wanted your own Yang figurine, you'll be very jealous of YangGang Chosen One, who just received a custom order pop figurine of Yang from Funko Boss. It's got the math hat, the suit, the scarf, and a chill pose to boot. It's pretty amazing. Check it out below. Shout out as well to Caleb Torres, who created a beautiful painting of Yang that you should also see in the links. Finally, the Berkeley YangGang are developing an app called Demo Draft that people who are interested in running for office can use to test support for them before they commit to a run. The app will allow for non-binding donations, communication and proliferation of policies and platforms through forums, testing of support through polls, and more. You can check out their website at the link below. Very cool. Thank you to all who are working on this. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Make sure you and yours know how to properly vote by mail. Make sure your representatives know you'll hold them accountable for education and logistics on voting. Spread the word that poverty is the #1 killer. Check out the Demo Draft website. Help recruit other organizations to the cause and get everyone to sign the UBI petitions. Flood Congress and Trump with calls, tweets, and letters using the ResistBot or Income Movement easy contacts below. If you need financial help, consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, United Way, or the H3 podcast thread. And don't forget to Yang Daily.